Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. Let's look at these supposedly real scary things that people have seen or heard while camping deep in the woods. So enjoy and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Over the years, some strange things have happened at my campsite. I live in Oregon, and in the summer, I spend as much time as I can camping. I have the site I like a lot. That's up on a hill. I have been going there to meet a Sasquatch. Is that someone who spent the summer there? The young ones are the ones that come to my camp. I rarely see the adults, but I can hear them smashing rocks in the creek. When I went there for the first time, I went with a friend. I always got tired before he did, so I was sleeping in the tent when he called my name and told me to wake up. He said that out there are lights. Yes, it was bright when I opened my eyes. I went to sleep again. Soon after telling me to get up, you have to see this. He woke me up in a more urgent way. Yes, I can see the lights, I told them. They are smart, okay? After that, I fell back asleep before the end of my sentence. I remember him saying that it's still here, just over the trees. It's not doing anything. I thought he was scared or thought we were in danger or something like that. Even though I didn't get up, it made me think, wasn't that something that happened fast forward to the summer after that? I was getting used to hearing the Sasquatch at the creek, but this may have been one of the first times they were in my camp when I was away. After hearing bipedal footsteps, once approached my tent, I was so happy. Then I heard something click that scared me. Have you ever seen the signs for that movie? That's how it seemed to sound. I said the first thing that came to mind right away. No aliens. I don't like aliens. What do you know? The clicking sounds are immediately replaced by the sounds of water and the babbling brook. I'm not even kidding. I just couldn't believe it. So I asked myself, that was pretty strange. So I forgot about it. The next time I thought about aliens, I was up in the mountains camping in the rain. I was inside my tent when I woke up. For some reason, it wasn't very bright. I was about to go back to sleep when I stopped and thought, wait a minute, who is shining a light that is bright enough to light up my tent? No one was camping anywhere near here. Sasquatch don't use lights, and by this time, I was fully awake and the light was off. But I had to get up and look around anyway. I didn't realize how dark it was outside until I stepped out of my tent. It was pouring rain, but I had tarps all over my tent. So why bother? Just think about this other small thing and move on. So now it's last summer, and every night I'm camping, I turn on my Zoom 2000 recorder and record what goes on in my camp while I sleep. Now is the time for Sasquatch to show up. I usually listen to the recordings in the winter when there is more to hear. One morning, I woke up and found that my recorder was set to WAV format instead of MP3. I always recorded in M3 to save space on that little memory chap. The recorder has a switch on the back that lets you change it from WAV, M3 to M3. So, when I got home and put it on the computer, I saw that there was one exactly 1 hour and 2 minutes in. At first I thought, what in the world is going on? I was alone in the tent. So I began to wonder who could have changed this. I begin to listen to the first WA through it in an hour. I'm paying close attention as the wind flows past the creek and into my breath. I'm listening for sounds like footsteps, clinks in my kitchen, etc. When I suddenly let out this terrifying, blood-curdling scream during the recording. When I heard it again, I almost screamed. I almost don't want to hear more, but I really need to know what comes next. The next thing I say on the recording is, it's fine. I just have to go to the bathroom. Who did I tell this? I don't remember any of it, so I don't know. I don't sleepwalk, have night terrors, or do anything else weird when I'm sleeping. So I don't know what the answer could be. I listened to the first few seconds of one M3 recording, and it starts with me sleeping. As soon as the recording starts, I hear a zipper, and that's it. I'll never go camping by myself. Well, at this point, too many people are missing, and this whole thing was so strange that I feel lucky I'm not missing everyone. Be careful, I went into the woods. You shouldn't go alone. Things even stranger than this happen all the time. I just finished primary school in Thailand, which means I'm moving on to high school. This story takes place at my elementary school. It was a scout camp, and we had to stay there for 3 days and 2 nights. On the second day, it rained a lot, so we had to move to our school to sleep instead of staying at the camp. We took what was left of our stuff with us, and went back to the camp to get anything else. A bit about the history of this school. It was built in 1936 on the site of a closed hospital, which probably has a lot of dead people in it. There was even a murder between a man and a woman. I don't know all the details yet, so that's all I'll say for now. We were at our school's large auditorium that night. Even though it was still raining, our scout leaders were just putting on a show. Because it was raining, we couldn't hear much of what they were saying. So, after the show, we just started talking. Except for the rain, the school just went quiet. We were just joking about ghosts as my friend and I walked up to our room to change after taking a shower. We were on the 5th floor of the building, when all of a sudden we heard this screech coming from the 1st floor. We just thought that some kids were messing around or something like that when my friend and I went to the bathroom that night. We went to bed around 1 a.m. because the show ended so late. So when I woke up, my friend took me to the bathroom. He did not feel good. He got a flashlight and we walked to the bathroom in our school, which was at the end of the hallway on the 4th floor. We heard footsteps that weren't ours while we were walking. We started to feel scared and decided to run back home. We could no longer hear the footsteps. So we walked around and tried to calm down. As we were walking back to our room, we saw what looked like a woman, a very tall woman. We thought that a high school teacher from our school would be here later. We didn't know something, so we got ready for the lesson she was going to give us. As we got closer, however, it was clear that the woman was floating. Both my friend and I washed our eyes. The woman was definitely floating, and she is now coming toward us. She was about 5 inches above the ground. Her head was cut open, but not all the way, like when someone tried to cut a log with a machete and got stuck. We ran as fast as we could to where the hallways met the second set of stairs, and ran as fast as we could back to our room. When we got back to floor 5, the scout leader who had let us go to the bathroom lectured us for running and probably waking up a lot of other students. He pushed us back into the room, and when we told our friends the next morning, no one believed us. I'm still scared by this, but I moved out of that school this year, so I guess I'll forget about it eventually. But now I'm afraid to camp anywhere, even in the woods. My girlfriend and I have been together for about a year. For the sake of this story, I'll call her C. She is here to get her master's degree, but she comes from another country. She missed her family very much, and she wanted to fly back to see them for a few weeks. This meant that she wouldn't be able to spend Christmas and New Year's with me, so she wanted to do something special before she flew back. I made up my mind right then to take her camping. We had a hard time deciding where to go, and I was surprised that she agreed in the first place, since she's a neat freak who's never slept outside. I, on the other hand, have been camping dozens of times and am a very experienced outdoorsman, if I do say so myself. Since I had never been there before, we decided to go to Death Valley. Winter also seemed like the best time to go and see. Thought I had a cool name. The weather looked good, and we quickly got everything we needed for our trip together. We left for Death Valley early in the morning and got there around noon. Death Valley seemed to have every kind of desert landscape you could imagine. In a small area, we could only see bleak stone mountains with jagged to flaky stone outcroppings, but when we turned a corner, we saw a huge desert plain. The next turn showed a landscape full of desert plants, and the next one after that showed dangerous cliffs and roads that wound through canyons. There were blue, green, red, orange, yellow, grey, and black rocks. The drive took almost 5 hours, but it felt like no time at all because we were enjoying the scenery so much. Death Valley is a very interesting place. Surprised me in a good way because all I was expecting was a desert of sand and some white rocks. I showed C how to set up a tent, make a fire, split wood, carve branches, roast marshmallows over a fire, and cook over a fire. We had our late lunch after I cooked a pizza over the fire. We went hiking, and our campsite was in a valley between 2 mountain ranges. It was in a remote part of the valley. It was as quiet as a grave, and a cool breeze blew through it. There were maybe 3 other groups camping near the bathroom, but most of the individual campsites were pretty empty. Also, they were only about 100 feet apart, so it wasn't a big deal. I chose a spot that looked out over the main road where we could see animals, mostly jackrabbits, field mice, ravens, and other birds. I saw a bat that probably came out of a nearby cave in the mountain cliff, and I heard other campers talking about a kit fox that had come strangely close to their camp. By late afternoon, it was unusually cold, even though the weather reports said it was the same temperature as back home. I was freezing, and I don't know why. Maybe it was because the air in the valley was cold and dry, but the cold went right through my 3 layers of clothes and seemed to cut right to the bone. I was cold, even though I moved around a lot at our campsite and had just come back from a hike with C, so I made a big pot of soup while our dinner was cooking in the embers. Near the fire, people had put hamburger, steak, mushrooms, vegetables, and gravy in foil packets, using up the pizza ingredients that were left over as well. We ate dinner quickly, picked up some large branches that had fallen to add to our cords of firewood, and then went into the tent. By 8 p.m., just before we went into the tent, C told me in the dark that a person on a horse was coming down the hills in the camping area. She sounded strange about the sight, and even though it was cool, I turned my head toward the spot in the campsite she was talking about, which couldn't have taken more than 2 seconds. But all I saw was a very tall man walking down the hill toward a smoky campfire at another site. He was so wrapped up against the biting cold in a long brown blanket and hoodie that I couldn't see his face. As he went to the bathroom, he took short, stiff steps. His blanket hung down near his feet. I thought his strange walk was because he was cold, like I was. I saw his hooded head turn toward me as he walked through the site toward the bathroom. He had a flashlight, but I couldn't make out what he looked like. After a few seconds, I could no longer see him near the bathroom, so I went into the tent and tried to fall asleep. I wanted to tell her scary stories, but she was too afraid to listen. Then I thought about the man and asked her where she saw the rider on a horse. I hadn't seen a horse anywhere. Just the man who was wrapped up and carrying a flashlight saw something very different. She says she saw a person with a flashlight coming down the hill, but he was bobbing up and down and moving much faster than a person would normally walk. As he went through the darkness of my campsite, she saw that he was on a black horse and that he had called out to me. I thought this was strange because I only saw a man and not a horse. There was no way I could have missed a horse coming down the hill. And when she called out to me, it didn't take me long to reply in her voice. The area was so quiet that a writer would have been easy to spot. Anyway, I tried to tell C that she must have been wrong, but she insisted she saw a man on a black horse. She talked about how the tan harness showed the shape of the horse's head. I thought it was just a misunderstanding and hid under the blankets. Maybe she was talking about someone higher up on the hilly campsite, and I just looked in the wrong direction. Still, I told her what I saw, and I thought it was kind of strange. She seemed very scared, though, and said there was only one man. She didn't want to talk about it anymore, so we forgot about it and went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to my friend nudging me awake and telling me she thought someone was trying to get into our tent. I opened my eyes wide and looked around the tent and at the zippered entrance. All it was wind. If someone had been at the tent flap, their shadow would have been visible against the light of the campfire. I got my machete and stuck my head out the door to make sure no one was there. I was right. There was not a sound at the campsite. A few times after that, I thought I heard footsteps on the gravel outside, but I was already drifting back to sleep because the cold was so strong. When C and I woke up, we got our stuff together and spent the rest of the day exploring the Death Valley area. In the evening, I drove us back to civilization. Along the way, on a lonely stretch of dark highway, C says she saw a rider on a horse going in the direction we were going. I didn't see much, and I casually mentioned what happened the night before, which almost made me cry. She added more wood to the fire and went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. She had a strange feeling that someone was watching her or following her. When she turned around to go back to the tent, she saw a tall man near the bathroom from which she had just come. This made her feel scared. She ran back to the tent and went in. She says that her tent was cast with the shadow of half a man. Half of a man is in, with one arm, half of a head, half of a body, and one leg. Then she heard our tent moving, and she heard something pulling on our tent's zipper. Then she woke me up because she thought someone was trying to get in. I hadn't seen a shadow, so I thought the noises in the tent were just the wind. C said that by the time I woke up, the shadow was gone, but that she heard footsteps around the time she said I was going to sleep. The part about the footsteps was creepy. I was pretty sure I heard footsteps too, so I tried to be logical and told her it was probably someone from another camp going to the bathroom. When you think about it, I never saw the tall man go back up the hill to his camp. I didn't say much to her because I didn't want to make her even more scared than she was. We had left Death Valley and were back in a city. Anyway, the next day we hung out with these friends and helped her pack up the rest of her stuff. I took it to the Los Angeles airport and sent her off after dinner. The airport was very busy. Not strange, since Christmas was almost here. Still, as we moved through the crowd, I saw a tall man lingering a few meters behind us. He kept about the same distance, but I knew he was following us because I am very aware. The man was wrapped in a brown blanket and wore torn clothes with a hood pulled tight around his face. He also wore boots and walked with an awkward gait, like an old man with arthritis in a blizzard. The airport was pretty warm on the inside, so my t-shirt and thin sweater were fine. The man's worn clothes were very different from what most travelers wore. I could see his lips, but not the rest of his face, and I didn't try to get a better look because I didn't want him to know I was looking at him. I don't know what it was, but something about him made me feel very uneasy. I was really scared by that guy, and I don't think I'll ever get over it. I don't know what this guy could have been. It's hard for me to figure out. Some people said it was like a skinwalker or something similar, but I don't think so because it doesn't seem to fit with what they do. It doesn't make sense for my encounter to be with a skinwalker. But maybe one of you knows more about what happened after we got back from camping. I'd love to know when this happened. About 2 years ago, a few friends and I went camping in the woods near my house to get drunk and try some new bud. We got my friend's dad to let us smoke. None of us had ever smoked before, so we were all very excited. I think there were 4 of us, and we were all about 15 years old. We were all pretty drunk. We were having a good time, so we rolled a bad joint and smoked it. We were all pretty happy. I had never even smoked a cigarette before, so I just coughed and sputtered and didn't feel anything. But I was already drunk, so you get the idea. There were a bunch of kids who weren't even close to sober, and it was pitch black except for a small campfire. Then, while we're all sitting there talking, we hear a scream not far away. I don't think we were sure at first if we heard it or if we were just making it up. When we heard another scream, we all looked at each other a little scared. We're all pretty scared, and this scream wasn't a happy, playful scream anymore. It was so scary that I screamed at the top of my lungs like I was in real pain. At this point, everyone was going crazy. We didn't know what to do if someone got hurt. We started having fights, and as stupid kids who were high-end in the woods, we didn't know what to do. Was that what you thought we'd do? Go look for scary things, or just hide like a bunch of kids? Well, this goes on for a while, and all we do is scream and freak out every now and then. After a while, one of my friends really loses it, grabs one of the few torches, and runs back to my house in the dark. The rest of us just looked at each other for a second without saying anything, and then we followed him. We finally got to my house, which isn't too far from where we were camping, but these goddamn screams were so loud that we could hear them from my house. I banged on my front door and begged to be let in, but when my brother answered, he told us to screw off and that he couldn't hear any screaming. He also told us not to knock on the door again because everyone was going to bed. We think about what to do for a while before realizing that we can't just leave our stuff in the woods. We decided to take a walk around my property to calm down and then go back, chill out, and go back to sleep. By the time we got to the top of the estate, the screaming had stopped, and we were walking in the middle of the street and nervously laughing about what had happened. Then we saw a guy in a black hoodie coming toward us. He was a little scared, but we didn't think much of it. As he passed us, he quickly turned on his heel and started walking backwards down the hill while staring at us. Now this has really scared us. He stopped next to this bush and took a few steps to the side so he could hide behind it and watch us. At this point, all we can do is stand there and whisper to each other while looking at him. Then he takes another step to the side and starts running toward us. We all scream at the same time and run off into the night. We end up running all the way to the town centre, which is about 2 miles away, and just pooping the whole way. When we get back to my house, we try to wake up my dad by whispering and shouting through the letterbox for about an hour until someone finally lets us in. So yes, that was something. Sorry, it's probably not the scariest story you've ever read, but I wanted to tell you about this scary thing before I forgot the details. I still have some questions about what happened that night. Did someone just hurt themselves by slipping? Was that guy just another common drug addict? I don't know, but I'm about to go through what might be the scariest thing I've ever done. To fill in the blanks, you will need some context and background information. I am a 21-year-old man from the southern part of a Midwestern state. For personal reasons I told you where, but I will say that my town, which is more of a community, is one that you probably won't find on a map anytime soon. A little warning. My boyfriend had something to do with what happened over the scariest weekend of my life, so I am a gay man. You should also know that I had 13 surgeries on my left leg and foot because of a freak accident. It has been hurt so much that it can't run, jump, or even walk well at times. All of this happened in the summer of 2017. I had just turned 21 and to celebrate, my boyfriend, who we'll call Julian to protect his privacy, took me to a concert. My best friend Hunter, his girlfriend, Kristen and I all decided to pool our money and buy a cabin in the woods in the north. Hunter had just finished his first 2 years of criminology school, and I had just finished my first 2 years of social work. We all wanted a fun weekend where we could drink, smoke, and play a few games of Monopoly. Now, none of us had really camped before, especially in a state that was far from where we lived. One time, my father took my siblings and me to a cabin in the Smoky Mountains. That was the closest we had ever been to a bear. After 4 great years together, I still think of Julian as the love of my life. He loved being outside, but he never slept on the hard ground. All of this made a cabin one necessary. We want to be far from home and in the middle of nowhere, mostly to avoid people. We left on Thursday night because we knew we would want to get to the cabin early, since the owner said to be there by noon. Also, you should know that Julian and I took turns driving on the long trip, while Hunter and Kirsten rode in the back seat. Someone had to stay awake as long as we were driving to keep the driver awake, so we didn't go off the road. This is important to remember for the future. Still, Julie and I didn't sleep a wink from the time we left my driveway until the time we turned onto the dirt road that leads to the cabin. I don't know how we found it or where it is, but that doesn't mean I never go back. I can tell you that after we got off the interstate, we drove for more than an hour on back roads with the help of Google Maps. The only people we saw on these back roads were in a small town with a gas station, and for some strange reason, a pole barn. At some point, the road led us to a gravel drive that must have taken 2 hours by itself. I'm not sure how Hunter booked this place, and I never asked because I didn't think it was important to know. The cabin itself was pretty nice, but when we pulled up, it was so surrounded by trees that almost no light could get through. Ironically, it looked like a scene from a horror movie, and the only porch was a fair-sized man. I had talked to him on the phone before, so when he said his name, I knew right away that he was the owner. It wasn't long before we were told to clean up after ourselves, buy our own food, and pay for any damages. He also said that there was no reception out here, and that we couldn't hunt, which was also funny, but we didn't hunt after he said that. It wasn't hard to figure out how the cabin was set up. When you walked in, you were in the living room, which had a large sitting area, a fireplace, and even a poker in a corner. I remember that because I couldn't help but wonder why it stood out in a strange way. The living room led into a hallway with an archway to the right that led into a kitchen that was also the dining room. At the end of the hall, there was a back door that led to a jacuzzi outside. Before that, there were 2 doors next to the back door that led to separate bedrooms. Julian and I went through the door on the right, while Kirsten and Hunter went through the door on the left. During the day, we spent a lot of time hiking, playing board games, and drinking, which is another important part of the story. We all drank and laughed while we hung out in the hot tub. Julie and I went to sleep around 11:30. Now, both bedrooms had the same layout. Each had a large queen bed, a private bathroom, and windows that looked out onto the woods. It's almost strange how much you can remember after going over the events in your head many times to try to remember anything you might have forgotten. Now, if you remember that Julian and I hadn't slept in over 24 hours and had been drinking, you can see where we passed out and how we wouldn't have noticed what happened the first night. It wasn't until hunting and Kirsten's war of words broke out. The next morning, Julian and I got up to find out what all the fuss was about. We didn't expect to find Kurtz and the rest of the gang crying and packing all of our things, telling us to leave right away. Hunter tried to convince her otherwise, but my first thought was that they had gotten into a fight and she wanted to cut the trip short. I was against this, since I had already spent a lot of money and gas to get this far. I was told that Hunter and Kirsten didn't talk about what had happened during the night until then. At first, everything was normal, but around 3 a.m., Kirsten woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. She didn't know what woke her up, but she had a strange feeling in her stomach. Her face was turned toward Hunter, who was still sleeping, so she thought that maybe the heat of his breath on her face was what woke her up. However, the feeling kept going, and she realized that the bedroom window was facing the woods. But from that point on, Hunter stuck with what happened that night when Kristen woke him up and told him to stop breathing down his neck. This was better than her second choice. He was very groggy. Because of this, he wasn't sure about what he thought he saw, but as soon as he could see clearly again, he knew what he was looking at. Hunter says that Kristen said he turned as white as the moonlight shining in behind her. He didn't look at Kristen when he woke up, like he usually did. But when he realized what he was looking at, he swore he saw hands on a dark face pressed up against their window. This was the split second after he woke up. He woke up right away, but by the time he did, the figure was already gone. At first, he tried to ignore it as a dream, but when he saw what scared him, he couldn't. When he saw 2 handprints on the bedroom window, he knew that someone had been watching them while they slept. At that very moment, there was a loud pounding on the door that was between our bedrooms. He kept hitting the door over and over, as if he was trying to break it down to get inside. Kirsten ran into the closet and sat there for 30 minutes, while the knocking kept coming. Hunter stood by the bedroom door with his weight pushed against the creaking wood. When the pounding finally stopped, Hunter thought he had given up and turned around, but when he saw him standing at the window again, he realized he hadn't given up. He then put his hand up and waved with his index finger, as if daring someone to come closer. He then turned around and skipped away. Yes, I do mean that they ran back into the woods. When they told me the story, I thought they were joking. At first, I thought that was because I didn't see Julian sleeping because I don't sleep much. So when I do sleep, I crash hard. Julian, on the other hand, has always slept well. Last night, it seemed like the alcohol and lack of sleep had changed that. Kirsten was still upset about what had happened, and she really wanted to go home. But the 3 of us insisted on playing until the last night, with one of us keeping watch. Do you know who that would be? Yes, it would be the nocturnal one. The rest of the day went well, but nothing was done with the substances. I don't know if it was because we all had hangovers from the night before, or because everyone was really paranoid. By 9 o'clock, Kirsten and Hunter were tired from the night before, and Aiken had gotten on Kirsten's nerves even more. We let her and Hunter stay in our room for the last night. Now, I did agree to keep watch, but I will say that I am a very protective boyfriend, especially of Julian. So I planned to keep an eye on him from our room while he slept. When we went to bed, I sat on the top of the bed with my back against the headboard. Julian went to sleep with his head on my thigh, something he would do when he was scared or having a high night terror. So I would play with his hair until he went back to sleep. I don't know when I fell asleep, but when I woke up, the room was completely dark. At first, I thought it was strange because I was sure that this room had moonlight shining through the night. When I looked out the window of my bedroom, I saw a dark shape that looked like a man. When I looked him in the eyes, he backed away and ran toward the edge of the forest. I ran over to the window, which made Julian fall off my thigh and wake up. As soon as he realized that my heart was racing, he jumped out of bed, ran across the hall to our friend's room, and shut the door behind him. I know that sounds strange, but you have to remember that Julian and I lived different lives. I wouldn't say I was the most straight person in the world. I was mistreated for most of my life, and it got worse when I came out. I also have 5 older brothers who were very hard to get along with. In other words, I don't get scared easily, and I don't take crap from anyone, especially if I think my friends are in danger. I had told Julian before he went to sleep that if there was trouble, he should go to Christian's room, find Hunter, barricade the door, and tell them to close the blind. So he did. When I walked into the room through the window, I thought the man had already left. I could barely see as it was, but when I saw, thanks to the moonlight ahead, pop out from just behind the tree line, I lost it. I threw open the door to my bedroom, ran into the living room and grabbed the steel poker from the fireplace. I don't know what made me do what I did next, but I've already said I look out for my friends, so I ran down the hall, stomping on purpose so the others knew where I was. When I got to the back door, I almost kicked it open, stepped outside and yelled in my loudest, most threatening voice, "Who do you think you are at this point?" He got up from the line of trees, stood perfectly still, and started skipping toward me. Hunter had just told me what to do, so I raised the poker high and asked what it wanted. Then he stopped, tilted his head, and told me to get inside with the loudest voice I had ever heard. Yes, it was. And then he ran. When I say ran, I mean sprinted so fast that my first instinct was to turn around and go back out the door. Now, as I've already said, I can't run, so when I got back inside and shut the door, he was already pushing on the door and yelling obscenities at the top of his lungs while trying to get in. When I saw him for the first and only time, at least 30 of his teeth were missing. His hair was wild and fell all over the place, and dark circles were under his eyes. I couldn't tell you exactly what he said, but it was something about breaking in and tearing us all apart because we were so ugly. Like I said, I look out for my friends. So when he broke through my hold on the door and took his first step inside, I went apeshit like I'd never done before. I slammed the poker left and right across this man's face over and over again. I'm pretty sure that most people would have just stabbed the man with the end. But when I thought our lives were in danger, the only thing I could do was attack, and attack hard. I kept hitting this old man until I heard something loud hit the floor and heard him scream in pain. After that, he turned around and ran into the woods. I also tried to catch him, but I couldn't. When I went back inside, I saw what had fallen on the floor and made him run a big black butcher knife. I think the clack was me breaking his hand and him dropping the knife, which I didn't even know he had. I stayed outside for the rest of the night, hoping that Hunter would come back after all the noise, but he never did. We did report the incident to the police and got a full refund, but nothing seems to have come of it so far. So, to the homophobic man in the North Dakota woods who preys on people every chance he gets, I hope you enjoyed the damage to your hand, face, and who knows where else. I hope you never see anything like that again, because if I ever feel threatened like that again, I'll probably stab you instead of beating you. Thanks for listening to these scary camping stories that are said to be true. The last one was a tough one. It was probably one of the creepiest camping stories I've read in a very long time. If you like these stories, please click the like button. It really helps me. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, you can let me know by leaving a comment, Fluffy Elephant. Why not just confuse everyone who doesn't stay until the end? I'll be back with another scary video soon.